Hello, my name is Sonya Harwood-Johnson and I'm the director of the Gorgas House Museum here at the University of Alabama. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make butter from scratch, which would have been a very common thing people at this house would have done since its construction in 1829. So we have a more modern version here of a butter churn. We have historic versions here of different styles and techniques that they would have used throughout the different time periods, but for today we're going to be using this hand crank butter churn. Our first and almost only ingredient that we need is heavy whipping cream. We whip the cream until it turns into whipping cream, and then we whip it a little bit farther, and that's how we get that butter and buttermilk separation. After it separates into butter and buttermilk, we'll strain out the buttermilk, and then the buttermilk needs to be pressed out of the butter. And to do this, you fill up a big bowl with ice cold water and squeeze all of the extra buttermilk out of the butter. Then, once we have a solid block of butter, we get to shape it with these things called butter paddles. We have historic versions of these here at the Gorgas house as well. And what we'll do is we'll pat and pat and pat and shape our butter into the blocks that you see today. To season our butter today, we are just using salt. If you want to make this recipe at home, you're welcome to add any ingredients you want to your butter, whether that's garlic, parsley, other seasonings makes great additions. But today we're keeping it simple, as they would have done in the past, with just sea salt. So let's get started. So now we will start by pouring our heavy whipping cream. Some recipes say to let your heavy whipping cream come to room temperature, as that will make it whip a little bit faster. But today we're using cold cream just to make sure that the dairy stays at temperature as much as it needs to. So we'll fill this container just about halfway. So now I will take this lid, and you can see it has the gears that turn. Place it on here, snap on it just like that, and then we start churning. To fully get butter, it takes about 10 minutes of hand cranking to separate it into butter and buttermilk. In the past, women would often do this task, and a lot of times they would spend time with each other. One person doing the laundry, one person churning the butter, and other household duties at the same time. This really helps perpetuate friendships among women and strengthen those bonds while they're doing what we would call tedious tasks today. After you're churning for just about 10 to 15 minutes, you should feel it begin to separate into large chunks of butter and buttermilk. And at this point, you now have butter. So if you can see, we will take off the top, pull out the churn, and there you have the butter and the buttermilk. Now, you can take and pour out the buttermilk into a separate container and use this for lots of other recipes. And the butter, we will begin to put in ice cold water. So this is where it gets a little bit messy. You'll start pulling off the butter with your hands and putting it in that ice to make sure it stays cold. So now our goal is to press and wash the butter and get out any of that extra buttermilk that may still be in there. So you can see some of that buttermilk is still coming out. So you'll take it under the water, squeeze, press, until it all starts coming together. This part gets a little bit cold with all the ice water, but you can see the last of that little buttermilk starting to come out. And make sure your hands don't get too hot, because that will start to melt the butter as well. At this point, you can season the butter if you want. And start to knead it in and mix it in the rest of the butter, making sure to keep it cold so that it doesn't melt too quickly, especially in this Alabama southern heat. Once all your salt is mixed in, now we can begin to use our butter paddles to shape it into the shape that we want. In the past, and at the Gorgas house, we have butter molds where they could shape it into things like flowers, animals, more round shapes, square shapes. And there you have it. Here is your homemade butter.